I remember the sound first. A sharp crack that split the night wide open. Then another, and another. By the time I realized they were gunshots, the pain had already torn through me. Searing, burning, like fire eating me alive from the inside. My knees buckled and the world spun as I collapsed against the hood of my own car. 7 shots. That's what they told me later. But in that moment I couldn't count. All I knew was that every breath felt stolen. Every heartbeat a rebellion against the bullets tearing me apart. Through the blur of agony, I saw her. My wife, standing a few feet away, her face pale in the dim streetlight. Her hand clutched her mouth, her body shaking as if she couldn't believe what she was witnessing. For one fleeting second I thought she was horrified, terrified of losing me. But then, I noticed something else. Her eyes flickered, not just with fear but with something colder, something that looked disturbingly like guilt. I tried to call her name but blood filled my mouth. The metallic taste spread across my tongue as I sank to the ground, my body no longer my own. My vision narrowed until all I could see was her silhouette and the shadow of another man, his hand still wrapped around the gun that had torn my world apart. He didn't run. He just stood there, chest heaving, eyes blazing with something between hatred and victory. For a moment I wondered if he'd fire again, but he didn't need to. I was already falling, my strength draining with every heartbeat that splattered across the pavement. The sirens came too late. My consciousness slipped before I could even hear them clearly. All I felt was the cold creeping in, numbing the fire inside my chest. And then there was nothing, only blackness. In that darkness I expected peace, but instead memories flooded in. My wedding day, her smile when she said I do, the nights I believed we were inseparable. And then the cracks. Her late nights, the hidden messages, the subtle shift in her voice when she thought I wasn't listening. They played like a broken film reel, looping again and again, until even in the silence of near death I couldn't escape the truth. I should have died that night. Every doctor would later tell me I wasn't supposed to survive. 7 bullets. No one walks away from that. But somehow some part of me refused to let go. Whether it was stubbornness, rage, or the faint hope that I might still uncover why my wife was really standing there with him, I don't know. The blackness swallowed me whole, but I didn't disappear. I lingered, caught in the thin space between life and death, waiting for the next betrayal to reveal itself. And that was only the beginning. When I woke into the darkness of the coma, my mind replayed everything that had led me there. It was as though the bullets hadn't just torn through my body, they had ripped open the memories I had worked so hard to ignore. And in that silence I saw the truth clearly. The night I was shot wasn't the beginning, it was the consequence. Our marriage had looked perfect from the outside. Friends envied us. She was beautiful, graceful, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and shift the air without saying a word. I was proud to call her my wife. Proud and blind. The first cracks were subtle. Late nights at the office, she said. Dead phone batteries when I called. A shift in the way she kissed me goodnight. Quick, distracted, as though her lips were somewhere else. At first I told myself it was stress, exhaustion, maybe even just the natural dulling of passion that comes with time. I wanted to believe that. God, I needed to believe that. But love has a cruel way of blinding you. I remember one evening when she stepped outside to take a call. Her laugh drifted through the half-open window, lighter, freer than I had heard in months. When I asked who it was, she smiled too quickly and said, "Just a friend." Her eyes didn't meet mine. I felt something cold settle in my chest, but I buried it. I chose silence over confrontation because silence was safer. Then came the messages. Small, easily explained at first. A notification lighting up her phone at midnight. A name I didn't recognize. She said it was a coworker asking about a project. I wanted to trust her, so I did. Again and again I chose trust even when it hurt. Looking back, I see it for what it was, denial. She was pulling away from me inch by inch, and I let her. I told myself we were just going through a rough patch, that if I gave her space, she'd come back to me, that the woman I had married was still in there somewhere, waiting for me to fight for her. But there was a moment, small but unforgettable, when I should have known. We were sitting at dinner, the silence between us heavy enough to choke on. Her phone buzzed, and I saw her face light up in a way it hadn't for me in months. She caught herself too late, but the glow lingered. That glow wasn't mine anymore. Still, I stayed. Still, I believed. I convinced myself love was enough to fix whatever was broken. I ignored the late nights, the secret smiles, the way her touch grew colder. I let myself believe we were unshakable. But denial has a price. And mine came in the form of 7 bullets. What I didn't know then was that those small cracks were only the beginning, that a stranger was already stepping into the spaces I had left empty. And soon his shadow would be impossible to ignore. The glow on her face haunted me. I had seen it at dinner that night when her phone lit up, and I told myself it was nothing. But once you notice a crack, you can't unsee it. Every glance, every laugh, every flicker of expression becomes a clue. It started with her smile. Not the polite one she wore for neighbors, or the tired one she gave me after long days. This one was different, private, unguarded, almost girlish. I would catch it when she read a message, or when she slipped out to the porch to take a call. It was the kind of smile a woman makes when she feels wanted. And it wasn't meant for me. One evening I walked into the living room and found her curled on the couch, phone pressed to her ear. She didn't notice me at first. She was laughing softly, twirling a strand of hair around her finger like a teenager in love. My stomach twisted. When she finally looked up and saw me, she froze for a split second before covering the moment with a quick, "Oh, it's just a coworker. Nothing important." I wanted to believe her. I almost did. But something about the way she tucked her phone under the pillow afterward told me the truth she wouldn't say out loud. Still, I kept quiet. I swallowed my suspicion, letting it fester in the pit of my stomach. But suspicion has a way of sharpening your senses. Every vibration of her phone, every late-night shower after a long day at work, every distracted kiss on my cheek, it all became evidence. And even if I didn't want to admit it, the case was building itself. The breaking point came one night in our bedroom. She was scrolling through her phone, pretending to read an article, when I asked her a simple question. "Are you tired?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she whispered absent-mindedly, "Yeah, babe. I mean, Mark." My blood turned cold. Mark. That name didn't belong to me. Her eyes widened the second she realized what she'd said. She tried to laugh it off, claiming it was a character from the story she was reading. But the panic in her voice betrayed her. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just nodded as if her excuse was enough. But inside, something cracked open, and the truth began to pour in like ice water. From that moment on, I couldn't look at her the same way. The woman I had built my life around suddenly felt like a stranger living under my roof. I still loved her. I hated that I did, but love no longer blinded me. I watched her carefully, quietly, the way a detective watches a suspect, and that was when I began to notice something else. Shadows of someone else creeping into my home. A stranger I had never met, but one whose presence was everywhere, in her laughter, her lies, and the name she let slip from her lips. Soon he would no longer be just a shadow. He would step fully into the light. After she slipped and called me by another man's name, it was as if the walls of our home began whispering. Every sound carried weight. Every silence carried meaning. And every time she reached for her phone, I felt the presence of someone else. Someone unseen, but very real. At first, it was just murmurs. I'd hear her retreat to the kitchen late at night, her voice lowered to a near whisper. If I walked closer, her tone would shift, rising an octave, forcing a laugh, or suddenly ending the call with, "I'll talk to you tomorrow." The way she glanced at me afterward, too casual, too rehearsed, only deepened the hollow ache in my chest. Then came the voice. One night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, when I heard her slip out of bed. She moved softly, thinking I was lost in dreams, but I followed her with my ears. A faint creak of the floorboards, the quiet click of the back door. A minute later, I heard her outside on the porch. And then, carried through the thin night air, another sound, deep, male, muffled but unmistakable. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't a coworker leaving a voicemail. It was a man. A living, breathing man speaking to my wife in the shadows of our home. My heart thudded so loudly I thought it would give me away. I strained to catch the words, but the fragments were broken by the night breeze. Still, I heard enough. "Miss you, "Can't wait," and her soft laugh, the same one I hadn't heard directed at me in months. That was when suspicion began to spiral into something darker. I started noticing patterns, her showers that lasted longer after those late-night calls, the perfume she wore on days she claimed she was just running errands, the secretive way she guarded her phone like it held her very soul. I began to obsess. I replayed every conversation, every look, every unexplained absence. My mind twisted itself into knots, trying to piece together a puzzle that I already knew the answer to but couldn't bear to face. There were nights I nearly confronted her, the words burning in my throat. But fear stopped me, not fear of her denial, but fear of confirmation. Because once you name the stranger, once you drag him out of the shadows, there's no going back. Still, his presence grew heavier, like a shadow that stretched across every corner of our marriage. I could feel him at our dinner table when she pushed food around her plate. I could feel him in our bedroom when she turned away from me at night. He was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost who had somehow claimed more of my wife than I had. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before this stranger stopped hiding in whispered conversations and stepped fully into my life. Bold, undeniable, and dangerous. The stranger's shadow grew too heavy to ignore. One night I finally broke. She was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through her phone with that secret smile tugging at her lips. My chest burned with questions I could no longer swallow. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice low, steady, but sharp enough to cut the silence. Her head snapped up. For a moment I saw guilt flicker across her face. But then it vanished, replaced by indignation. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, eyes narrowing as though I had insulted her. "You know what I mean," I pressed. "The late nights. The phone calls. The name you called me, Mark, don't lie to me anymore." For a heartbeat she faltered. Then, like a skilled actress slipping into character, her entire demeanor shifted. Her lips trembled, her eyes filled with wounded disbelief. "My God," she whispered, "you're paranoid." The word hit me harder than any bullet ever could. She stood, pacing the room, her hands wringing as if she were the victim here. "Do you even hear yourself? Accusing me of cheating? You've been acting so controlling, so insecure lately. It's like you want me to be guilty of something." Her voice rose, breaking with just the right amount of emotion. "Do you think this is what marriage is supposed to be? Me constantly under interrogation? You're suffocating me." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Was I losing my mind? I had heard the laughter, the whispers, the man's voice. I wasn't imagining it, and yet the way she spun the story made me question everything. She came closer then, her hand brushing my arm, her tone softening into something almost tender. "You need help," she murmured. "You're tired, stressed. You're seeing things that aren't there." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her phone and shove the truth in her face. But her eyes locked on mine, steady, calm, dripping with false concern. For a terrifying moment I wondered if she was right. Maybe I was unraveling. Maybe love had twisted me into something paranoid and broken. That's how gaslighting works. It doesn't just make you doubt them. It makes you doubt yourself. I retreated into silence, letting her words echo in my skull. She carried herself like the wronged wife, sighing in frustration, wiping away crocodile tears, convincing herself of her own innocence as much as she was trying to convince me. But even as her manipulation gnawed at my sanity, a small, stubborn part of me clung to what I knew. I wasn't crazy. There was someone else, and if she wouldn't tell me the truth, I would have to find it myself. It happened on a night that felt ordinary, too ordinary. I had just settled into the couch when my phone buzzed. The number was blocked, the voice on the other end muffled and urgent. "You need to come outside. It's about your wife." Every instinct screamed at me to ignore it, but suspicion and fear drove me out the door. I told myself I'd find nothing, that maybe it was a prank, but deep down, I knew. The street was quiet, wrapped in the heavy stillness of midnight. I stepped into the cool air, scanning the shadows. That's when I saw her, my wife, standing at the edge of the driveway. Her face was pale, unreadable in the dim glow of the streetlight. For one foolish second, relief washed over me. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe she'd explain everything. Then he appeared. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, solid, purposeful. The gun in his hand caught the light, a cruel glint that froze me where I stood. My heart slammed against my ribs as reality sank in. This was no misunderstanding. This was the stranger I had been chasing in whispers and shadows, and he was very real. Please, I managed, raising my hands, but the first shot cut me off. Fire tore through my chest. The sound echoed down the street, but the world narrowed to pain. Another shot, then another. Each one punched me backward, stealing my breath, shredding my body until I collapsed against the hood of my car. Through the haze, I looked at her. My wife. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood there, frozen, her eyes wide with a horror I couldn't decipher. Was it fear for me, or fear that her secret was finally laid bare? I tried to call her name, but my voice drowned in blood. My legs buckled and I slid to the ground. The gunfire stopped. Silence followed, broken only by my ragged gasps. The man's shadow loomed over me, his face twisted with something like triumph. He didn't pull the trigger again. He didn't have to. 7 bullets were enough. As my vision blurred, I searched my wife's face one last time. I wanted to believe she hadn't planned this, that she hadn't lured me into the night to die at his hands. But the way she avoided my eyes, trembling but unmoving, carved the truth deeper than any bullet ever could. The darkness closed in fast, swallowing me whole. My body gave out, but my mind clung to one thought, sharp and bitter as blood. Betrayal had brought me here. And yet, death didn't take me. The moment the 7th bullet ripped through me, the world collapsed into silence. No pain, no sound, just a vast, weightless void that pulled me under like a tide. At first I thought it was death. Darkness stretched in every direction, endless and cold. But then images began to bleed through the black, hazy, distorted like fragments of a broken mirror. I saw myself as a boy, running barefoot through the yard, my mother's voice calling me inside for dinner. I saw the day I first kissed my wife, her smile so radiant it had eclipsed everything else in my world. For a moment I let myself sink into that memory, desperate to believe it still meant something. But the scene twisted. The smile shifted, stretched into something cruel. Suddenly it wasn't me she was kissing. A faceless man's shadow replaced me, his arm wrapped around her waist, his laughter mingling with hers. Her laughter. God, I could hear it, echoing through the emptiness, sharp and mocking, growing louder until it filled the void. No matter where I turned, it followed me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I was trapped, forced to relive the betrayal in a loop that had no end. The visions changed again. I stood in our bedroom, the sheets tangled and stained with whispers I couldn't erase. I heard his voice, low, confident, intimate, speaking words I was never meant to hear. "He'll never know," he said. And then her reply, soft and breathless, "I don't care if he does." I felt my chest tighten as if the bullets had followed me into this nightmare world. The memories bled into regrets. Arguments I should have handled differently. Signs I should have seen sooner. Nights when she pulled away from my touch, and I told myself she was tired. How many times had I chosen denial over truth? I drifted between moments, watching my life like a film I couldn't pause or rewind. And in every frame, her presence lingered. Beautiful, poisonous, untouchable. Somewhere beyond the visions, I felt a faint pull. A voice, distant but steady, urging me to come back. Not hers, never hers. This voice was different, stronger, clearer. Maybe a doctor. Maybe my own stubborn will refusing to let go. But the laughter dragged me back down. "Stay here," it teased. "This is where you belong." I fought against it, clawing through the darkness. I wasn't ready to be erased, not like this, not by them. If there was breath left in me, I would use it to rise. If there was blood still pumping through my veins, I would make it matter. The void trembled. Light pierced the darkness, faint but growing. The laughter faded, replaced by a steady beep, beep, beep that cut through the silence like a lifeline. My body lay broken, but my mind latched onto that sound. It meant machines. It meant hospital. It meant I wasn't gone. I wasn't finished. The first thing I felt was weight. My chest heavy, my throat raw, every breath like dragging air through fire. Then came the sound, the steady rhythm of machines beeping in time with my fragile pulse. I opened my eyes slowly, the world flooding back in with blinding light and muffled voices. Shapes hovered over me, blurred, moving too fast. A nurse gasped. Someone shouted for the doctor, and then her, my wife. She was standing at my bedside, her face streaked with tears. Her hands trembled as they reached for mine, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Oh my God, you're alive! Alive!" I stared at her, but I couldn't speak yet. My throat was thick with tubes, my tongue heavy, my body refusing to obey me. All I could do was watch as she cried, as if the universe had returned me to her in some act of mercy. But were those tears born of love or of guilt? I remembered the laughter in the void, the shadows of another man's arms around her, the night I should have died, the flash of betrayal in her eyes before the bullets cut me down. No matter how tightly she clutched my hand now, I couldn't erase the suspicion gnawing at me. The doctors came rushing in. They marveled aloud, calling me a miracle. 7 bullets, a coma, weeks of silence, and yet here I was. They adjusted machines, checked vitals, scribbled notes, but their voices blurred into background noise. My focus was fixed on her. She leaned closer, her forehead nearly touching mine. "I prayed for you every day," she whispered. Her breath was warm, her tears falling onto the sheets. "I thought I lost you forever." I wanted to believe her. God, part of me ached to believe her. But the memory of her secret smiles and the stranger's voice on the phone pressed down on me harder than any wound. My lips moved, barely forming a sound. "Why?" Her eyes widened. "Why what?" The nurse interrupted before I could force the words out, adjusting my oxygen and warning her not to overwhelm me. She nodded quickly, wiping her face as though she'd been caught. When the room cleared again, it was just the two of us. Silence hung between us, heavy and sharp. She kept her hand on mine, but I didn't squeeze back. I couldn't. Because beneath the fragile relief of survival, a darker truth was solidifying inside me. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying for herself, for the life she almost lost, for the plan that hadn't gone the way she wanted. I may have been broken, stitched together by doctors' hands and fate itself, but one part of me had hardened beyond repair, my heart. As I lay there, staring at the woman I once thought I would die for, I realized something had shifted. I was no longer her fool, her shield, her pawn. I was her reckoning. The day after I woke, the room no longer felt like a sanctuary. It was a stage, and I was the star witness who hadn't yet spoken. 2 men in plain suits arrived just after sunrise, their badges flashing briefly as they stepped inside. Detectives. Their presence carried the kind of weight that silenced nurses and made the air feel heavier. "Mr. Carter," one of them said, his voice steady but probing, "we need to ask you a few questions. If you're able." I nodded faintly. My body ached, but my mind was sharp, sharper than they expected. They pulled up chairs, notebooks in hand, eyes trained on me like hawks circling prey. "Do you remember what happened the night you were shot?" Flashes ripped through my mind. The phone call, the trap, the glint of the gun. And her face. Always her face. My lips parted, but before I could speak, she stepped forward. "My wife." "Detectives, he's barely awake. He needs rest. This can wait." Her tone was gentle, but her eyes betrayed urgency. Panic. The taller detective raised a brow. "Ma'am, we'll keep it brief." He turned back to me. "We believe this was a crime of passion." "Someone close. Maybe someone who thought you were in the way." His words cut deeper than any bullet. My wife squeezed my hand, a little too hard, as if warning me to stay silent. "Do you know anyone who might want to hurt you?" the second detective asked. I hesitated. My heart pounded so loudly I wondered if they could hear it. My mind screamed her name, screamed the lover's shadowed face. But my throat closed, and all I managed was, "I don't know." The detectives exchanged a look, half doubt, half patience. "We'll be back," the taller one said, rising from his chair. Sometimes memory takes time. As they left, I caught the faintest shift in her posture. Relief. Not for me, but for herself. When the door closed, I turned my head toward her, every ounce of strength gathering in my voice. "Crime of passion," I rasped. "Why do they think that?" She didn't flinch. Instead, she slipped into a mask of sorrow, her tears flowing on command. "Because it's true. You've always been so good, so trusting. Who would do this to us but some jealous madman?" Her words were polished, practiced, as though she had rehearsed them 100 times in the mirror. But a single crack betrayed her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I let the silence hang, my gaze drilling into her. She looked away, pretending to fix my blanket. pretending not to feel the suspicion thickening in the room. For the first time, I realized she wasn't just playing the grieving wife for me. She was performing for everyone. The doctors, the nurses, the detectives. But the mask she wore was slipping, and when it fell, I would be ready to see the face beneath. The day I left the hospital didn't come quickly. It was carved out of months of pain, sweat, and humiliation. I relearned everything: how to breathe without machines, how to move muscles that felt like dead weight, how to trust my legs to hold me when the world swayed. 7 bullets had torn me apart, and yet every morning I woke determined to piece myself back together. The nurses called me stubborn. The doctors called me a miracle, but I knew what I really was: unfinished business. Every scar on my body reminded me of that night. I could feel them burning when I closed my eyes, whispering that the story wasn't over. The first time I stood unaided, the entire ward seemed to hold its breath. My legs trembled, sweat dripping down my back, but I forced myself upright. I looked in the mirror across the room and barely recognized the man staring back. Thinner, ardent, eyes darker than before, but he was alive, and so was I. My wife was there, of course, applauding, tears shimmering as if she were the proud partner of a man who had beaten death. But I saw it differently. I saw fear behind the performance, her mask threatening to slip each time the detectives returned with more questions. She didn't know that with every step I gained back, I also gained clarity. I wasn't just learning to walk again. I was preparing to confront the truth. The day of my discharge arrived. The air outside the hospital doors tasted strange, sharp, almost electric. I gripped the metal railing, taking in the sky, the sounds of traffic, the simple fact that I was still here. The cameras of local reporters flashed, their voices calling out questions. How does it feel to be alive after 7 bullets? Do you remember who shot you? I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I lifted my chin and took that first step beyond the hospital gates. Each footfall was a declaration. I will not be broken. Beside me, my wife smiled for the crowd, her hand resting lightly on my arm. To them, we must have looked like a couple united by tragedy, but inside me, fire churned. I knew what they didn't. That betrayal had stood in my own home, had smiled in my face while planning my death. The flashes kept coming, but I didn't flinch. I walked forward, scarred but unbowed, leaving the sterile white walls behind. The world thought I was just a survivor. They had no idea I was also a witness. As I crossed the threshold of the hospital into open air, I made myself a vow. The truth would come out. Whether it destroyed her, him, or me, it no longer mattered. I had been the victim once, never again. People think survival is about the body, about whether your heart still beats, whether your lungs still pull air. They're wrong. Survival is about what you do after you're left breathing. I walked out of that hospital scarred, stitched, and battered, but the real wounds weren't on my skin. They were carved into my trust, my love, my marriage. Every night since, I've lain awake replaying the chain of betrayal, her secret smiles, the phone calls whispered in the dark, the trap that led me into 7 bullets, and then her tears at my bedside, tears that weren't for me, but for the failure of a plan she thought had ended with my funeral. The detectives kept circling, asking questions, digging into inconsistencies. I let them. I let her talk, weaving her web of innocence until even she began to trip over her lies. Each word she spoke became another thread tightening around her throat. But here's what no one tells you about truth. It costs. The truth cost me my home. I couldn't look at the walls we once shared without hearing echoes of her laughter with another man. I couldn't sit at the dinner table without imagining his hands where mine should have been. The truth cost me sleep. In every dream I felt the bullets again, tearing through muscle and bone, dragging me back into darkness. The truth even cost me pieces of myself. The man who once believed in love without suspicion, who trusted too deeply, who forgave too easily. That man didn't walk out of the hospital with me. He died on the pavement that night. But for everything I lost, I gained something sharper. Resolve. I don't wear these scars as marks of weakness. They're proof that I lived through her betrayal, through his violence, through death itself. Proof that I can no longer be broken the way I once was. My marriage is gone. my trust destroyed. But my will has never been stronger. I've come to understand that walking out alive wasn't an ending. It was the opening line of a new story. A story where I don't play the victim. A story where I no longer beg for answers, I demand them. Where justice isn't just a word in a detective's notebook, but something I will carve out of the lies with my own hands if I must. Survival is not enough. Survival is just the beginning. So let them think I'm a miracle. Let them marvel at the man who took 7 bullets and still walks. They don't know the truth. The real miracle is not that I lived. The real miracle is that I walked out alive and I'm coming back for everything they tried to bury with me.